Manifesting Napoleon Hill Tuesday. I am Beverly Fells Jones, the Silver Fox of Consciousness, and I help people become the best that they can be. I help people pass certification exams through my Slam Your Exam. I do the master class on Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich book. So part of the reason I'm here is to share a number of things with you, and Tuesday is devoted to Napoleon Hill. And today I am going to be talking from Napoleon Hill's book, Outwitting the Devil. Now, Outwitting the Devil did not get published until 2011. Now, Napoleon Hill has passed on a long time ago. However, according to the book, he wrote this, he put it down pen to paper or typewriter, so to speak, and his wife said as long as she's alive, she did not want him to publish this. And then he passed it on to someone else who also had an issue about having that while they were alive. And I want to say that this is a good book. In fact, over the last several weeks, as a matter of fact, this book has been brought up to me to new people that I've met when I told them that I did the master class on Think and Grow Rich, and they were talking about reading it, and I said, yes, I've read it, and somewhere in here, I don't know if we can see, but along the line, I got highlighted places of interesting information that is really extremely pertinent today to the things going on in the world today. Outwitting the Devil is Napoleon Hill saying that he had a conversation with the devil. Now, if you are familiar with Think and Grow Rich at all, and if not, I'll just explain. Napoleon Hill often went into a meditative state, and he had what he called his board of directors. And that board of directors were people that he wanted to meet, people who he wanted their expertise, their knowledge, their capabilities on his board, living or dead. And some of you are going, huh? He did this within meditation. Now, within that story, and now he's talking about he had this conversation with the devil. And basically, for those of you who are of the Christian faith, the devil is the Lord of the earth, right? That's his domain. That's where he walks around. And so this is an interesting book, and you can read this whether you are Christian or not. Trust me, because there's some lessons in here that are valuable to everyone. And kind of like I did with Think and Grow Rich chapters, I was reading the intro. I told you, the intro is normally a really, interesting thing for Napoleon Hill. But what it makes it so good for me today and for you is because yesterday's podcast, which I'll put a card up here somewhere, right? For you to be able to click on and access. I'll probably put it at the end of this video. But yesterday was about belief system. And in this beginning part of the book, he's talking about his beliefs. Now, the other thing is he's going through his life and the things that he did. And so I had to smile. So maybe on this side, I'll put the link to the very first video I had about who Napoleon Hill was and the fact that he wasn't rich. Yeah. So he's going through the things that he talked about his university, his magazines, and different things that he did from his point of view and made him look well in your sight. So he goes on and he talks about his defeats and the things that he did. It's just like a review of his life. It's like a tiny autobiography. But there's some things in here that you would do well to listen to. One, he talks about doubt, right? He talks about doubt and doubt making its appearance. He says, he goes on and he said, "Am I embarking on a fool's mission?" The idea of a man who was down and almost out, presuming to write philosophy of personal achievement, seems so ludicrous that I laughed hilariously, perhaps scornfully, right? And I've talked about the fact that yeah, he was not rich. He was actually borrowing money from other people. But he said, I squirmed in my chair, ran my fingers through my hair, and tried to create an alibi that would justify me in my own mind in taking the sheet of paper out of my typewriter before I really began to write. But the urge to continue was stronger than the desire to quit. I became reconciled to my task and went ahead. So I ask you, what is it that you desire? What is it that you want? And are you in a place where you will continue rather than quit? Is the urge to be successful, is the urge to do a certain thing, accomplish a certain thing, go to college, um, get a certain job with a certain company? Is it so strong that you will not quit? And that's a lesson that we all can learn there. So, one, have that desire, that real great desire to accomplish what you need. He goes on and, he goes on to talk about purchasing the business college and began laying plans. This was in 1924. But I love the way he kept saying, and I'm skipping through a number of things. He says, again, the germ of discontentment began to make itself felt in my blood. Again, I knew that I could not find happiness in that sort of endeavor. I turned the business over to my associates and went on the lecture platform lecturing on philosophy of achievement to the organization of which I had devoted so many of my previous years. So here's where he talks about when he got out of that business with the university, which I did kind of talk about in that first video. He goes on to talk about almost losing his life in Canton, Ohio. Don R. Millette, that's also in the article in that first video that I talked about, and how he got out of there in time. And there's notes. Now, there's a thing here in this Outwitting the Devil. It has sub information and edited and annotated by Sharon Lecter. She's the co-author of Rich Dad Poor Dad. Okay. She was also the author of Think and Grow Rich, A Woman's Choice. And I have that book here also. So he goes on to talk about that experience in hiding in West Virginia and, until the criminals that murdered him went to jail. one of the things he talks about during this time of fear, okay, so we don't want anything to stop us, right? But there's something might happen in your life that causes you to be in fear of something, right? And he was in fear of his life, and that's why he went to family in West Virginia. And he said my reasoning faculty had almost been paralyzed. His fear of physical harm. So fear will stop you from thinking, it will stop you from doing things, it'll make you hide, it'll put you in a depression, it will take you in a whole lot of things. However, he goes on to talk about he went for a walk. He was tired, right? He needed to make a decision about what he was going to do, where he was going to be. He was living off his relatives. He needed to do something. And so he talks about a lightning flash idea that came into my mind. And he talks about the idea this is your testing time. You have been reduced to poverty and humiliated in order that you might be forced to discover your other self. So, this is how he talks about the fact that he wasn't doing anything. He was, out of money, that whole thing. So, he said, no, I have got to make a difference. And in the book, he goes on and he does paraphrasing the poem Invictus by William Ernest Henley. And it's quoted in the book. Sharon Lecter was nice enough to put the whole thing in. Because one of the things I do when somebody does a small quotation, and one of the things he'll does in his book is he'll do a quotation, but he won't say where it came from. Or he might mention a name, but it's just a snippet. And thankfully for the internet, you can take that little snippet and find the whole thing. But in this case, I don't have to do that. All right, so he goes on and he talks about changing his fear and getting rid of the fear. And he said he got this idea, but he calls it his other self, gave him the idea to get in his automobile, drive to Philadelphia. And he said, you will receive aid in publishing your philosophy of achievement. And he did the thing that a lot of people want to do today. Okay, you ready? They want to fake it until they make it. Now, you've probably been hearing, I could have a green screen behind me. For those of you, green screen is like you fade into it. So Hollywood uses it to put all kinds of backgrounds in there. And I was watching a video yesterday, and they were showing this guy in this chair, and he had the green screen, so it was split. Green screen on one side, and what he put behind him, and it was a private jet. He was sitting in a private jet with a bottle of champagne. Or you can put yourself in front of a Lamborghini, or you can put yourself into a multi-million dollar mansion. And you can rent clothes. Did you know that? You can rent expensive clothes and you can be in those clothes and then give them back. In fact, it's like women can rent ball gowns now. So you can rent $1,000 ball gown for $100 or two or whatever. All right. So you can pretend. And so this is what he did when he went to Philadelphia. He drove all night to Philadelphia. Here again, my other self took charge and gave the command to register at the most exclusive hotel in the city. So he was faking it. He calculated he had enough money to stay in that hotel for three, at the max 4 nights. He highly tipped the bellboy, you know? It was like he said, I tossed the bellboy $1 and he estimated what it would bill. So it was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. My other self is telling me to do this. Now, By now, you should know the other self is his self subconscious. It's your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind knows a lot of things. Also, when you are, oh, what I want to say, working with your subconscious mind, you are meditating, you are asking for things, you are in that definiteness of purpose. There's a thing called the 0 point field, which I've talked about in other podcasts. And we are all connected to it, and we are all connected to one another. And when we send out a thought, that thought goes on to that 0 point field. I refer to that your mind phone. So you have a mind phone, and that mind phone sends out energy just like your cell phone sends out energy to the cell tower, and it gets to that person you're calling, or that person is calling you, and you get information back. And I know it sounds woo woo. I know it sounds strange, but it happens to you all the time. If you went and you were and you were saying, I need to call Mary Jane, or I need to call my dad, or I need to do something, and that feeling is so strong that you do it, or you get this idea that pop in your head to go do something, and you go, boy, that was a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence. Your subconscious was talking to other subconscious, or was out on the 0 point field and pulling information in. And that is an advanced lesson that I just gave you. But he goes on and talks about that. But here is one of my highlighted sections. Where is it? Down there. Okay. And it says, above everything else, get this fact clearly fixed in your mind. Okay, get this fact in your mind that your other self will not do your work for you. It will only guide you intelligently in achieving for yourself the objects of your desire. And this is what I call inspired action. So you get the information, you can sit on it. He didn't have to drive to Philadelphia. He didn't have to stay in that expensive hotel. He didn't have to do that. He could have gone and got a cheap hotel, right? But he followed the instincts and the ideas that came to him. And it led to him calling the right person, talking to that person. And that person, his name was Mr. Peldon. He called him, talked to him, and he got his book published without coming up with money. So I'll read this. I leaned back in my chair, shut my eyes, and went into a sort of a doze for a few minutes. Neville Goddard refers to going into silence. Jose Silva refers to it as going to level. I just refer to it as going into meditation. It says I was aroused by what seemed to be an explosion in the room. As I regained consciousness, the name of Albert L. Pelton came into my mind, and with it a plan with which I knew instantly to be the plan through which I would succeed in getting Mr. Pelton to publish my books. I remembered Mr. Pelton only as an advertiser in the Golden Rule magazine, which I formerly published. Now, when I did the first video, I talked about the Golden Rule magazine and the Golden Rule Awards. So this is just following along with what I shared with you. He sent him a letter, showed him the original manuscripts, and before long, Mr. Pelton said he'd publish his books, and he supplied the books, and he started giving them to his book buyers. His first royalty check was $850. Now remember, this is in the 1920s. That was several thousand in today's dollars, right? And it was enough for him to live through the 3 months until the book was totally published and he was out on the road. And in the meantime, in order to make sure he had money to live, he came up with another scheme. This was the one where he was training sales people how to sell and build motor cars. So he talks about that. He said, my income from that retainer was more than enough to take care of all my expenses for the following 3 months until the returns from the sale of my books began to come in. My other self, his subconscious, had not disappointed him. The money he needed was in his hand at the proper time. I've talked about this before. When you ask in the right way, when you believe and you have faith and you follow your inspired actions, things happen. I can't explain how they happen. They just do. A check comes into the mail for me. A friend of mine sends me a $500 birthday check. Well, a guilty friend of mine sends me a birthday check, right? Of which I will not discuss. Anyway, but you want to just go into silence, go into that meditative state, and be able to get yourself concentrating on the thing that you desire. I love this introduction. This isn't even into the talking with the devil yet. This is talking about things and his mindset. And he admits in here that he wasn't prosperous at the time he wrote his books. He calls failure a blessing in disguise. There is a solution for every legitimate problem, no matter how difficult that problem may seem. There is a solution, always. This morning I took some time and I watched a video, and this is probably about the 10th one, but on the subject, but it's on reversing Alzheimer's. Re- yes, Alzheimer's is reversible. Just if you know somebody and need something, just search on reversing Alzheimer's. It's food. It's your diet. It's not getting enough sunlight and a number of other things. And I'm not a doctor, but I am following the protocol because I want to be able to continue to talk to you and my grandbabies and my children and my friends, right? All right. And he also goes on to say, every great leader of the past whose record I have examined was beset by difficulties and met with temporary defeat before arriving. Remember, there is no overnight successes. There are steps, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And sometimes there's 5 steps forward and 1 step back. We don't know how many times a person has failed in different things until they reach that pinnacle of success. So think about that. Another one that is quoted is Ralph Waldo Emerson. He was born in 1803, died in 1882. And he said, explain the law of compensation. He said, for everything you have missed, you have gained something else. For everything you gain, you lose something else. So think of this whole idea that everything you miss. Oh, I missed going out with the gang last night because I had to study because I had an exam coming up. And I did well on the exam by missing hanging out. For everything you gain, you lose something else. So I can't come up right now with a good example of something I've gained. Well, I gained a new Power XL uh, air oven, air fryer oven. So I lost money. That's a quick example, right? But he goes on and he talks about his other self, the value of giving before trying to get, right? Well, we've heard about that. Givers gain. That's the motto of a networking group. Givers gain. Give as you before you gain. A lot of people are out here giving you things to help you learn, like I am, spending my time talking to you about this book and especially Napoleon Hill Tuesdays, right? Because the man was had a lot of good information. And as I live these things and I encourage you to live them, then you get to be better and I get to be better. One of the things I've learned is that when I learn something and understand something, or when I learn something with the idea that I am going to teach it, then I dig deeper. I want to know more. I'm not memorizing. When I have the book with me or notes, I don't have to memorize. But it comes naturally. The memorization comes naturally when you are so involved in a subject or in learning something that it just becomes part of you. Think of driving a car, right? Learning how to drive a car, how difficult it was in the beginning, or just go back to learning to ride a bicycle. That too is in the beginning, it was difficult and you had to do step by step, and then over time, it just comes naturally. So the more you talk about something, the more you do something, the better you become at it. And so Mr. Hill goes on and he says, my other self has taught me to concentrate upon my purpose and to forget about the plan by which it is to be attained when I go to prayer. He says, I'm not suggesting that material objects may be acquired without plans. What I'm saying is that the power which translates one's thoughts or desires into realities, has its source in an infinite intelligence which knows more about plans than the one doing the praying. Okay, and that's where I'm going to stop in the beginning of Napoleon Hill, Outwitting the Devil. Because we haven't even got to the section where he has this conversation with the devil. But I got one more thing before I go away, because it's highlighted in the book, which means it's important to me, so I'm going to share it with you. He says, I am not a prophet, but I can, with all due modesty, predict, and so can I, that every individual has the power to change his or her material or financial status. Okay, so you have the power to make a change by first changing the nature of his or her beliefs, which goes back to yesterday's podcast or Monday's podcast on the beliefs that are holding you from your success. He says, so the second highlighted one, the mind acts upon dominating or the mind acts upon one's dominating or most pronounced desire. Be careful what you set your heart upon, for it surely shall be yours. Ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open to you. And as my closing one, that I normally say at the end of every podcast, which is pre recorded now, is as you have believed, let it be done to you, and it is so. I'll see you next Tuesday for Manifesting Napoleon Hill.